Have you ever witnessed a moment when someone underestimated another person based solely on their appearance and ended up making the biggest mistake of their life? Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might surprise you. Today's story begins on a seemingly ordinary morning in a sophisticated bank, one of those where every detail seems designed to impress. Gleaming marble, cool lighting, employees lined up as if they were about to receive an international authority. Amidst the comings and goings of clients, people adjusting ties, checking documents, and taking care of their financial routines, no one imagined they were about to witness a twist worthy of poetic justice. It is precisely in this elegant and quietly tense setting that a billionaire enters. Not just enters, he invades the space as if believing the entire world should make way for him. His steps are firm, his gaze is calculated, and his posture conveys that arrogance typical of someone who thinks money buys everything, including respect. The employees, accustomed to demanding clients, immediately adjust themselves, as if his presence required an extra standard of perfection. Have you ever seen anyone behave like that? Someone who seems to measure people's worth by their bank balance or the brand of clothing they wear. While walking through the VIP area, the billionaire sees something that deeply disturbs him. A black woman, simply dressed, sitting calmly in one of the armchairs reserved for high-end clients. She doesn't seem nervous. She doesn't try to draw attention. She simply waits, observing the movement around her with tranquility. And it is precisely this tranquility that awakens in him an unjustifiable indignation. What goes through the mind of someone who believes that certain spaces belong only to certain types of people? Stay with me, because this question will make even more sense shortly. Without hesitation, he begins to complain loudly, drawing uncomfortable glances. He questions her presence, insinuates that perhaps there has been some mistake, that that kind of person shouldn't be there. His words cut through the room like blades, creating a tension that's almost palpable. Some employees try to disguise it, others look away, but the truth is that no one dares to confront him. After all, he's one of the institution's biggest investors, someone accustomed to giving orders, demanding things, humiliating people without anyone objecting. And yet, she doesn't react. The woman simply takes a deep breath, maintaining a steady and serene gaze as if she were fully aware of something he didn't yet know. Have you ever been through this? Have you ever been faced with someone who tried to belittle you without imagining who you really were? That's exactly the feeling that hangs in the air, that something much bigger is about to happen, something that will turn that scene upside down. The billionaire approaches, speaks to her as if he were granting her some kind of favor, asks ironically if she knows where she is, as if the VIP area were sacred territory reserved only for the chosen ones. He doesn't notice, or pretends not to notice, her impeccable posture, the way she observes every detail, as if she were already analyzing the situation from the outside. And it is precisely in this contrast between arrogance and serenity that the story begins to change color. What he doesn't realize is that at that very moment he is about to cross a line from which there is no return, a line that separates apparent power from real power, and that's where the story truly begins, because the next step he takes, the next word he speaks, could define the fate of everything that comes after. And it's precisely at this point right here that the turning point begins to approach. Shall we continue? And while that silent tension spread through the room, something curious was happening. The woman remained there, motionless, almost as if she were observing not only the billionaire's behavior, but also its impact on everyone around her. It was as if she could see beyond the offensive words, beyond the look of superiority, beyond the mask of power he insisted on wearing. Perhaps you felt this too. That moment when you realize someone is trying to diminish you without even knowing who you truly are. If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below about what has touched you the most so far, because often stories like this reveal wounds that many people carry in silence. And do you know why I'm asking you this? Because when you comment, share your experience, or even your opinion, you help transform this narrative into a space for exchange, support, and reflection. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people with this type of content, people who might need to hear exactly this message today. So if something in this story sparked a thought, a memory, or even indignation within you, take the opportunity to comment. I read everything, and each comment helps build this community that is growing with so much strength and sincerity. If you're enjoying the video, please leave a like. It seems like a simple, almost small thing, but the effect it has is enormous. Each like shows the platform that this content matters, that it deserves to be delivered to more people, that this message of reflection, poetic justice, and transformation needs to resonate further. And if you feel that stories like this touch you, inspire you, or make you see the world in a different way, take the opportunity to subscribe to the channel. That's how you ensure you'll continue walking with me through these exciting stories, always full of twists, lessons, and moments that we carry with us for a lifetime. But don't worry, I promise all of this is part of the journey. A journey that's not just mine, it's ours. And now that you're with me at this crucial moment, take a deep breath, because what's about to happen in this bank will make it even clearer that true power isn't measured by money, but by your attitude towards others, and the story is only just beginning. Let's continue. When the billionaire finally decided to approach the woman, the entire room seemed to shrink a few inches. It was as if the air became denser, heavy with a silent tension that only those who have witnessed a situation of disguised humiliation can recognize. He walked towards her with calculated steps, the steps of someone who believes they are in absolute control of the situation. And even before opening his mouth, his smile already betrayed his intention. It wasn't a smile of kindness. It was the kind of smile that tries to hide arrogance behind false cordiality, a mask, a performance, an attempt to soften the cruelty that would follow. In a low voice, but one filled with venom, he said something like, "You know, this space is usually reserved for clients who truly belong here." The phrase wasn't explicit, but the message was clear. It was as if he were saying she didn't belong there, that her mere presence created a contrast that bothered him. Sometimes humiliation doesn't need shouting. A whispered phrase with the right intention is enough to hurt more deeply. And that's exactly what happened there. The nearby employees looked away. Some pretended to be busy with paperwork that didn't even need organizing. Others simply froze, silently hoping it would end quickly. A feeling of unease filled the air, that bitter mix of witnessing an injustice and not knowing how to intervene. And at the same time, there was something almost unsettling about the woman's posture, because, despite the evident hostility, she didn't waver. There was no change in her breathing, expression, or even tone of voice when she responded politely. She maintained her composure, like someone who understands not only the situation, but also the hidden truth behind his arrogance. This contrast, the veiled attack on one side and the absolute serenity on the other, created a kind of silent shock in the room. And perhaps that's exactly what holds our attention so much when we hear stories like this. The human capacity to remain firm, even in the face of the clear intention to belittle the other. The woman seemed to see beyond that offensive comment. She seemed to read the scene, the inner workings of that mentality, as if each of his gestures were a predictable piece of a game whose outcome she already knew. And this generated a deep curiosity. Where did that calmness come from? What was the source of such absolute confidence? The billionaire, realizing that his attempt to destabilize her had failed, tried to sophisticate his attack. He spoke of people who occupy inappropriate spaces, about how certain positions demand a certain standard, and other vague phrases that, at first glance, might seem like mere social observations, but which carried a clearly directed intention. Each of His words was a reminder of how some people use power and status as a shield, believing they can mold the environment according to their own beliefs. He seemed to be trying to reaffirm his superiority with every syllable, as if he needed to prove to himself that he was right. But the woman remained there, looking at him with an expression that mixed patience and discernment. It was as if she were seeing not only the man in front of her, but the entire journey that had transformed him into that kind of person. And that disconcerted him, because when someone tries to humiliate and finds no weakness, only firmness, the entire structure of the aggression begins to crumble. The impact she caused didn't come from strength, but from stability, from confidence, from an inner truth he couldn't access. As the conversation progressed, a silent question began to spread through the room. Who was this woman? Why, in the face of such a clear attack, did she remain so calm? There was something about her, a posture, a glint in her eye, an almost palpable confidence that betrayed that this story wasn't as simple as he had imagined. The humiliation he was trying to inflict seemed to hit an invisible surface and bounce back to him as if his words couldn't find space to take hold. And as he spoke, something inside him began to shift. A small crack in his absolute certainty, a sudden, almost imperceptible discomfort. Perhaps it was the realization that she not only understood everything he was implying, but seemed completely above it all, as if she were just waiting for the exact moment to reveal something that would transform the entire scenario. And this, somehow, made the billionaire uneasy, even without understanding why. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject because there's something fascinating about how certain people deal with attempts at devaluation. When someone tries to diminish your worth and you remain intact, firm, aligned with yourself, something in the aggressor begins to crumble. It's almost as if the mask slips, revealing insecurities, fears, fragilities that were previously well hidden behind arrogance. And that's what began to happen there, in small layers, in involuntary gestures, in a gaze that avoided hers for a second longer than it should have. The dynamic was changing, even if he didn't clearly perceive it. The entire room seemed to sense this change. The silence took on a different texture, as if everyone were awaiting something inevitable, an outcome that didn't yet have a name, but which drew closer with each spoken phrase, each movement, each calculated breath. The woman, with the posture of someone guarding a powerful revelation, simply observed, allowing his own behavior to construct the scene he would later never forget. The transformation of that encounter was already underway, even before it became visible. And as we continue on this journey, I want to ask you to leave a simple phrase in the comments that encapsulates so much of what we're talking about. Write, "I'm on this journey too." The billionaire was still savoring his own arrogance when he decided, with all the authority he believed he possessed, to demand the presence of the bank's president. He raised his voice, lifted his chin, and made an impatient gesture to one of the employees, like someone accustomed to having all doors opened before even asking. It was evident that he expected someone to bow down, to rush, to obey immediately. And perhaps that was what always happened in his life, people too hasty to please, too careful to contradict. But on that day, in that atmosphere charged with tension and silent expectations, something completely different was about to happen. While the billionaire insisted on his demand, his gaze still fixed on the woman who dared to exist in that space as if she weren't breaking any invisible rule. An employee approached her with a respectful smile. It was a discreet smile, but full of recognition. He inclined his head and in a low but firm voice said, "The meeting room is ready. Everyone is waiting for you." The movement was so natural, so organic, that for a moment no one understood what was happening. The billionaire then let out a short laugh, that typical laugh of someone who feels untouchable, and shook his head, thinking they had confused the names, the positions, the roles. But there was no mistake. The moment the woman rose from her armchair was like a small, silent explosion in the room. She stood with the same calm she had displayed from the beginning, but now there was something more, a presence, a magnetism, a clarity about who she was that revealed itself in the smallest gestures. She discreetly adjusted her clothing, thanked the employee with an elegant nod, and began to walk towards the meeting room door. The sound of her steps, soft, firm, decisive, echoed in a different way. Suddenly, all eyes turned to her, as if they finally saw what had always been there, but which few had dared to perceive. And as she walked, the entire bank seemed to breathe differently. It was as if a revelation was about to emerge, a well-kept secret finally finding its way to the surface. The billionaire stood motionless, merely watching, trying to understand how this ordinary client was entering a room reserved only for high-level executives. His confusion was almost palpable, a mixture of disbelief and discomfort, as if his own senses were being challenged by reality. The most curious thing is that at that moment not a word was spoken. No one corrected the billionaire. No one explained anything. The truth simply revealed itself through actions, not words. And that's how some hidden truths have the greatest impact. Not when they are announced, but when they impose themselves through the naturalness of the facts. The woman walked through the room with the posture of someone who knows exactly her worth, who deeply understands the weight of her own decisions and the influence of her journey. Nothing about her asked for permission, nothing about her apologized, and this self-confidence provoked a silence so profound that even the air seemed to observe. At that moment, it was impossible not to notice the contrast between their mentalities. On one side, a man accustomed to measuring power by wealth. On the other, a woman who carried true authority, the kind that doesn't need to be displayed because it stands on its own. This difference screamed out even if no one dared to verbalize it, and perhaps that's precisely why this moment becomes so significant. It exposes the behind-the-scenes of the transformation that is about to happen, revealing that greatness is not imposed by force, but by presence. The billionaire, still trying to process the scene, took a few awkward steps toward the door, as if searching for proof that he was misinterpreting everything. But the more he observed, the more he realized that something utterly unexpected was happening before him. The woman wasn't just entering the room, she was entering as if returning to her rightful place, as if that space had been hers long before anyone there realized it. And that's precisely what gives depth to this story. The twist didn't come with shouting, confrontations, or direct humiliations. It came wrapped in subtlety, elegance, and the naturalness of someone who knows they don't need to defend themselves when the truth is on their side. The meeting room, once a symbol of restricted power, now became the stage for a revelation that would completely change the atmosphere of that day. And each step she took amplified this feeling of inevitability, as if we were facing a moment capable of redefining mindsets, attitudes, and even futures. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because there's something fascinating about realizing how certain people wield an authority that doesn't depend on titles, but on posture, history, and vision. The woman walked down that corridor not just as an executive, but as someone who deeply understood the impact of her decisions, and the way her presence redirected the energy of the environment made that evident. To some, she seemed to be simply going to a meeting. To others, especially those who observed more attentively, she was revealing a new chapter in a journey marked by overcoming challenges and consistency. And each of her gestures seemed to invite everyone there to rethink their own preconceptions. The billionaire, on the other hand, was undergoing an internal transformation that he himself tried to hide. There was something different in his gaze, a remnant of doubt, perhaps even fear. Because when someone you tried to belittle rises and walks to a place higher than you imagined, something inside you is forced to reorganize itself. This is the part of the story that few people tell. The discomfort of being confronted not by aggression, but by the truth, by the inevitable. Revelation that your worldview may be incomplete, distorted, or even mistaken. And while he watched everything, somewhat confused, the other employees began to notice what had previously been hidden in plain sight. There were discreet whispers, glances that met, a silent understanding that this woman was not just a special customer. She was someone who carried an authority that no one would dare question. The change in the atmosphere was so profound that even time seemed suspended, as if each second needed to be absorbed slowly so that everyone could understand what was really at stake. And that's the magic of great revelations. They don't need to be announced, they simply happen. Comment below. This makes sense to me. When the billionaire entered the meeting room, he still carried with him that false sense of control. He adjusted his blazer, ran his hand over the expensive documents he carried, and took a deep breath, as if about to deliver a flawless presentation. The large, dark wood table reflected his image with a gleam that seemed to confirm his importance. The advisors settled in silence, some leafing through reports, others simply waiting for the meeting to begin. For the billionaire, this was the ideal setting, an environment where his voice always resonated louder, where he dictated the pace, approved projects, and influenced decisions. It was there that he felt invincible, but that feeling was about to change. The door opened again, and the woman entered. The same woman he had tried to humiliate minutes before. Only now there was something different in the air, an almost imperceptible change in the breathing of those present, as if everyone knew exactly who she was, except him. She walked serenely to the main chair, the one at the head of the table, the one no one would dare occupy without permission. The billionaire's eyes widened, but he tried to hide it. Perhaps it was some kind of formality, he thought. Perhaps she was only substituting for someone at that meeting. He was still trying to fit the situation into some scenario that made sense in his rigid world, where power and appearance went hand in hand. But as soon as she sat down, the truth began to tear away the veil of his ignorance. She arranged the papers in front of her with precise gestures, raised her gaze, and looked at each of those present with a calm firmness. Then she looked directly at the billionaire, and it was at that moment that he felt a strange weight in his chest, as if he finally realized that something much bigger was about to happen. But even so, he continued trying to maintain his composure, adjusting himself in his chair, opening the folder with his projects as if nothing were out of place. And then, in a firm, clear, and completely confident voice, she said, "Before we begin, I'd like to give a brief introduction. For those who don't know me, I am the president of this institution." The silence that followed was almost physical, a silence that had texture, density, impact. The billionaire paled in a way that none of the financial risk reports ever could. It seemed as if all the air had been pulled out of the room. The advisors maintained their composure, but their eyes spoke louder than any words. They knew exactly what that revelation meant. Only the billionaire, the one who was so proud of his own vision, had been unable to see the obvious. He tried to take a deep breath, but the air seemed elusive. He tried to smile, but the expression broke halfway. It was the first time in a long time that he had felt small, truly small. The president observed his reaction with elegance, without haste, like someone who understands that certain truths need to be lived, not explained. And then, without raising her voice, only with the calm of someone who masters their own story, she continued, "Before we begin our agenda, I believe it is important to recall something that happened just a little while ago, in the lobby." The billionaire swallowed hard. She didn't need to be aggressive. She didn't need to humiliate. The strength lay in simple words, full of meaning. "The behavior I witnessed outside," she said, "is not consistent with the posture we expect from someone who wants to build a serious partnership with this institution. Here, we treat everyone with respect, not because it's protocol, but because it's a principle." Each of her sentences dismantled his ego layer by layer. There were no insults, no unnecessary exposure, There was only the truth, clean, direct, non-negotiable, and this truth had the power to bend structures he believed indestructible. The billionaire, accustomed to dominating rooms like that, could now barely hold his own gaze. He felt his credibility slipping through his fingers, not due to technical incompetence, but because of the very mindset he had carried with him for so many years. The president continued, with the serenity of someone who deeply understands the impact of her own words. Character weighs more than any investment. A fortune can open doors, but it is attitudes that determine whether they remain open. Silence filled the room again, this time denser, more reflective. The meeting seemed to have stopped in time. It was as if everyone there was witnessing something greater than a simple corporate gathering. This was a revelation about true power, the power that is born from integrity, emotional intelligence, and awareness of one's own worth. The billionaire felt his hands tremble slightly. His charts, numbers, and projections no longer meant anything in the face of what he had just heard. For the first time, he found himself forced to confront his own shadow, the backstage arrogance he carried as armor, and this realization hit him with a force he never imagined feeling in a boardroom. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because there's something almost transformative in observing the exact moment when arrogance finds its limit, and that limit in that case was her, the president. A woman he had tried to belittle, but who now revealed herself to be greater than any projection of power he could have imagined. The way she handled the situation, without aggression, without humiliation, only with clarity and firmness, created a kind of impact that went beyond the professional. It was human. It was moral. It was as if she was showing that certain decisions, however simple they may seem, define the course of an entire journey. His expression, once confident and imposing, now seemed lost. He tried to regain his composure, but it was as if his image were fractured, and each passing second revealed another piece of this hidden truth. He had no control whatsoever over that moment. There, she was in charge, and not because she shouted, but because she embodied respect, competence, and real authority. The entire room seemed to revolve around her presence, and the billionaire had no choice but to follow suit. The president took a deep breath, opened the report, and began the meeting. But the weight of that beginning would never be forgotten. He knew it. Everyone knew it. Nothing there would ever be the same again. Comment below, "This makes sense to me." The meeting continued with an almost rehearsed formality, but no one in the room could ignore the weight of what had happened minutes before. The billionaire tried to concentrate on the numbers, the graphs, the arguments he had prepared with such confidence. But it was clear, even to those who barely knew him, that something inside him had been broken. The security that had accompanied him like a shadow was now fragmented. Every time the president spoke, every time she made a technical observation or pointed out a detail he hadn't noticed, he shrank a little more in his chair. The realization that he had underestimated the wrong person grew like a silent flame and burned. The experienced and attentive advisors observed everything with the clinical eye of those who understand not only finance, but people. They knew they were facing a moment that transcended the corporate sphere. It was about character, about mindset, about how decisions made on impulse or prejudice revealed deep-seated aspects of someone's essence. And at the center of this silent stage was her, the woman the billionaire believed to be just another one. Now, every gesture of hers became a revelation about the true meaning of authority. She listened to his presentation until the end. She didn't interrupt him, didn't correct anything, didn't show impatience. She simply analyzed it attentively, as one who recognizes the other's technical competence, but doesn't allow it to overshadow what truly matters. In the end, she carefully closed the report, letting a brief silence linger over the table. A silence that spoke volumes more than any prepared speech. Then, looking the billionaire directly in the eye, she said with a serenity that cut deeper than any accusation, "Your proposal is interesting. Your numbers are solid. Your investment would undoubtedly be beneficial to us." She paused slightly, just enough to make his heart race, not with expectation, but with apprehension. "But there's something that weighs more than numbers, more than projections, more than any promise of profit." His eyes wavered. "Respect," she continued. "Here, we treat everyone with dignity. It doesn't matter their appearance, origin, class, or position. And the behavior I witnessed before this meeting reveals a mentality that does not align with the values of this institution." It hit the billionaire like an avalanche. There was no raising of voices. There was no humiliation, just a direct truth, impossible to deny. He tried to argue, saying he had been misinterpreted, that he was only concerned about the safety of the environment. But the president elegantly raised a hand, subtly yet undeniably asking for silence. "I fully understand what I saw," she said. "And more importantly, I understand what it represents. It's not just a mistake, but a vision. A vision that, if allowed here, would distort everything we are building." The entire room stood still. Even the clock seemed to hesitate before continuing to tell time. It was decision time. The president took a deep breath, placed her hands on the table, and concluded, "For these reasons, this partnership will not be possible." The billionaire felt the ground disappear beneath him for a moment. The refusal wasn't just about money. It was about human value, about what he had always believed to be paramount, and which, at that moment, proved to be exactly the opposite. He tried to react, but realized that any words would be too small in the face of the magnitude of her stance. But then, surprising everyone, she added, "However, I want you to know something. I'm not rejecting your proposal out of resentment. I'm rejecting it because I believe in the importance of clear boundaries. The business world needs brilliant people, yes, but also people capable of seeing others." She looked at him again, this time with empathy. "And perhaps this moment is an invitation for transformation, to review your journey, your decisions, your mindset." The billionaire didn't know how to answer, perhaps because, for the first time, someone wasn't trying to bring him down, but inviting him to evolve. It wasn't a defeat, it was a revelation. The president then concluded the meeting with impeccable professionalism. The advisors stood, exchanging discreet glances. The billionaire remained seated for a few seconds, as if needing to reorganize his own thoughts before he could move. This wasn't just a bad day for him. It was a mirror that reflected not only who he was, but who he could cease to be if he wanted to. People left the room one by one, until only he remained, along with that heavy silence that seemed to hold all the lessons he had tried to ignore throughout his life. Outside, the president walked with the same understated elegance, without needing to look back. She knew she had arranged not just a meeting, but an entire history. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because there is something powerful about this kind of poetic justice. It doesn't seek revenge, it seeks awareness. It doesn't destroy, it illuminates. True strength lies not in humiliating those who have erred, but in showing with dignity and firmness that respect is the foundation of any solid construction. And when someone in power is confronted with what they have avoided their entire life, the truth about their own behavior, a rare space for transformation is born. The president knew this, and that's why her stance had such an impact. It was a reminder that real power is not displayed, it is sustained. As the billionaire left the room, he felt something he perhaps hadn't experienced since his youth: humility, an uncomfortable yet necessary feeling of recognizing that he wasn't above anyone, that his fortune didn't buy character, that his arrogance wouldn't protect him from the natural consequences of his own actions. And this internal shock, however uncomfortable, had the potential to become a turning point if he chose to. Each person in that seat would carry that day as a milestone, not only because they had witnessed a stunning turnaround, but because they saw, behind the scenes of a seemingly simple situation, a profound lesson in humanity, The president's decisions not only changed the course of that negotiation, but also left an indelible mark on everyone who witnessed it, highlighting the impact of a leadership that understands its role far beyond the financial aspect. And that story, far from ending there, still echoed in the walls, in the corridors, in the thoughts of all who had the privilege of living it. The bank continued its normal operations, but there was something different in the air. A clarity, a silent reverence, as if everyone had gained something precious that day. Comment below, I'm on this journey too. And if you've made it this far, I think that already says a lot about the kind of message that resonates with you. Stories like this make us look inward, rethink our attitudes, observe the world with a little more empathy. And if this video gave you any value, any clarity, or even that silent impact that lingers afterward, then it's worth continuing this journey with me. So, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, not for the gesture itself, but because here we build a space where each narrative brings a revelation, a transformation, a new way of seeing the human journey. And of course, leave a like, not as an automatic ritual, but as a sign that this conversation made sense to you, that this exchange stayed with you until the end. This greatly helps the content continue to reach people who also need to hear stories like this. And since you stayed with me until the very last second, leave a comment saying, I'm with you until the end. That way I'll know who truly walked through this whole experience and felt the weight of this message. Now, if you'd like to continue this reflection and delve even deeper into topics that broaden the mind and heart, there's a video here that complements everything we've discussed today. Click and continue with me there. The conversation doesn't have to stop here.